Sigh, 1.22 will never come. Or will it? After 1.21.111 just came out, also known as the Copper Age, Aberrett says this would be ridiculous because obviously we beat in like 1.24, but actually I checked, it would be 1.25 if every major drop counted as an update, but obviously drops do not count as updates, and so we're on 1.21.10 and 1.21.130 for Bedrock, something I posted about publicly, and I actually had a response from David Cornerhard, the lead developer for Minecraft Realms, and he actually said you don't want to stay on 1.21 forever, before following up and saying, I agree, we'll be changing to new versions at some point, stay tuned. That is very exciting to know that is still in the works, and a little bit of positivity. I think that it obviously would make sense to see at some point while they're working on combat anyway, but before we get into that, I want to talk about what else Cornerhard has announced, because as the Realms lead, he was able to just share publicly that something coming soon to Minecraft Realms is saving. You'll be able to manually back up your world at any point, even while playing, and in the case of unexpected mishaps, automatic saves will still be stored every 30 minutes. This is a really cool feature that anyone with a Realms is going to appreciate, and I love it because it reminds me a little bit of the Legacy Console Edition, Exit Without Saving, so it's cool to see that come back. And speaking of old men, Mazelim22 says, back in my day, you got capes by attending Minecon, because the converse of that is the fact that the new cape is going to be the most common cape ever, because literally every single player will get it, and there's actually an interesting update on that I want to share today, because this is Q&A Saturday, and so hello, I'm AbbyX Toycat, and today I'm going to answer all of your questions about life, the universe, and of course Minecraft updates and everything else in between. But let's get started with the Copper Cape news, because you might have seen people posting this, which is a brand new cape they have seemingly seen, but to share this with you, it's not actually the Mojang Office cape, but instead is a weird bug default texture that Minecraft seems to sometimes load up. I've seen it a couple of times now. It seems to be if you're not connected to the marketplace, it will load the texture from somewhere in the game and show you this instead. I assume this person from this Reddit post was not connected to the marketplace because you get free Minecoins when you buy Minecraft, and so they either perfectly spent them, which is near impossible, or they have zero because they're not connected. I think that seems quite likely, but yeah, the Copper Cape has not leaked in any form yet. The only thing we do know is how you get it. There are 3 challenges, the first of which is to get 75 million copper golems, and Minecraft have given us the update as of yesterday, 2 days ago now, that we are 50% of the way there, which is very exciting. I am sure it's going to be hit this weekend at some point, but how does Mojang actually know how many copper golems have been placed? Do they have access to our statistics, and do Worlds of Cheats on count? The answer is they have access to advanced telemetry of every Minecraft player with an internet connection, and so they don't need your statistics because they just have a direct access to when you're placing it. And do Worlds of Cheats on count? We believe the answer is no, because I've seen people for previous challenges literally do the entire thing themselves. Think about it. If you go into creative or you use commands, you can summon 75 million copper golems in the space of a few minutes or hours, and people have done that for previous challenges, but Mojang hasn't counted it as complete. So either Worlds of Cheats on don't count, or they are deliberately removing some data from some sources, but in either case, I think there's an interesting comment here from Riskess, which is they've never understood exactly how these challenges are tracked, and sometimes they think it's all for promo and they just give the reward anyway, because they've never seen a game be like, well, you guys failed to complete it, so you'll get nothing. I think this is factually true. I mean, imagine designing this cape and then being like, oh, you guys just didn't get close enough, I guess no one gets the cape. And so, speaking of getting the cape, what do you have to do? Well, as it's now looking like the Copper Golem challenge is a lock-in, I would say next week we're getting a second challenge, which will also not be necessary, but then the week after that, starting October 13th or 14th, is when the challenge will start that you will need to participate in. To correct Ender Spider's comment, not every single player will get the cape, because every single player is going to have to do the thing. This is in the terms and conditions, and so let's imagine this 75 million Copper Golem challenge was the one for the cape, then what would happen is that only people who place the Copper Golem would get one. Some people will place multiple, but that means there's a cap of 75 million capes, and likely far fewer, because like I've mentioned, I placed 12 and I'm not even using that many Copper Golems. If you are to place far more, then you're taking capes away from other people's ability effectively, which is what makes me think that there will be some amount of fudging on the stats, or also the fact that this won't be the most common cape in existence, but we'll have to see what the challenge is starting October 13th, which will probably be after the Mounts of Mayhem. But speaking of Mounts of Mayhem, do we know how the Nautilus armor will be obtained? If you've seen the Mounts of Mayhem and you're excited for the Nautilus, you might also be excited for the Nautilus armor, and right now we don't actually know. I've got a list of big questions about the Mounts of Mayhem that I want to discover the moment we get our first preview or snapshot, but so far I would guess that looking at, say, the Copper Horse armor, this is likely to be the same places you would find Nautilus armor, and as weird as it seems to find it in a jungle pyramid, a nether fortress, or an end city, that's where I found my Copper Horse armor by the way, I do think that it seems entirely likely. Speaking of likely, why does Mojang put so much work into undoing changes in some biomes, like the frozen ocean for example, when there's such tiny low-hanging fruit like this chart right here? The percentages for finding the Copper Horse armor are the exact same between Bedrock and Java, except the Stronghold, where for some reason it's just 5 times rarer on Bedrock. Couldn't they fix that so much easier than destroying the frozen ocean? Am I crazy for suggesting that? Anyway, speaking of things I'm crazy for suggesting, I'm actually going to bring up this comment from Clarifray, a regular on the channel that you probably recognize if you've been in the streams, but they say, I want our Bedrock frozen oceans because boating across the oceans is fun, even if I cannot properly control my boat through these oceans. And I want to quickly point out that Mojang agrees with you. This was the promo they used at Minecraft Live. I'm going to watch it one more time just to be sure.
Something that does damage based on how fast you're going, so the faster you go, the more damage you deal with it.
Okay, so it's definitely Bedrock because it's vibrant visuals, and what's interesting is it's definitely a frozen ocean, but yet here is what frozen oceans look like now and have looked like since 1.20.100. There was a line on the 121.111 changelog, yes, these are ridiculous version numbers, but there was a line on that changelog about how they changed some of the biome blending, but clearly the biome doesn't look like this anymore, which interestingly tells us that the spear was developed, or at least the trailers were recorded, back before this update came out at the end of August, which means that the spear has been in development and ready to show off for some time. And also it means that the spear would be far more fun if the frozen oceans look like how they used to. I'm just saying, Mojang, I know that on Java this is how they look, but wouldn't it be better if both Java and Bedrock looked like how Bedrock used to, rather than both Bedrock and Java looking like how Java does now, which is sad? You know, just saying, there's an idea here. And actually, to make this even more interesting, Minecraft actually does show later or earlier on in the show, when they're talking about the Nautilus, a frozen ocean which is sad and destroyed like this one. So it does seem as though from the footage that they updated the frozen ocean in the process, between the process of making the spear and the Nautilus, which implies the spear came first and the Nautilus is kind of the second thing. Isn't that fun? I think it's fun. Anyway, speaking of fun, let's move on to the next one. Because while on the subject of spears, it is worth mentioning Dan Tomalty's 6464's point, which is an interesting point raised by releasing combat-related stuff in more of a trickle format, such as the spear with different reach and cooldown, is they can have a more overall accepted combat update on the whole once we get the other parts to it. Sure, it might not have all been developed simultaneously, but IMO have been integrated into the game over time, which is why it could be more successful than making a bunch of changes so suddenly. Indeed, I think that this comment makes a really clever point, which is that Minecraft are slowly just rolling out different parts of the combat update. Something we've seen is that the combat tests, originally released or last updated in 2020, have now got 2 of their features in the Mounts of Mayhem drop, that being the recharging of attacks and that being the longer reach for spears, and that means that if they continue to just trickle drop these features in, so maybe they could add later in there the shield changes, then you could get all of these important and much needed changes without having all of the horrible backlash. Because let's be entirely honest, there are a large number of people now who see Minecraft as their precious game and everything needs to exist exactly how it is with very small changes in between, which is part of why the drop system is so useful, because you can change a little bit here and a little bit there and then actually make the changes over a longer period of time. And also it shows how you can actually make combat changes that aren't hated. You've just got to drip feed them in there. I think this is what probably led to the success of the marketplace. There was a huge controversy when Bethesda tried to add paid mods to their game, but Minecraft added a marketplace that was just for worlds, and it was just a little option. Then they made the option kind of more prominent, and then they added paid add-ons after a long time and like slow little leaks here and there, and all of a sudden everyone's like, yeah, of course you pay for mods in Minecraft, and I think that that isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it does show how many people like the kind of slippery slope into sorts of things. But speaking of slippery slopes, Deadly Voltage 3 says, weren't the frogs the first feature to be added from a mob vote loss? You might have heard that Minecraft have said that this is the first time a runner-up from a previous previous mob vote has been added to the game, and technically speaking, they're telling the truth, even though Deadly Voltage would be correct that the frogs have come to the game despite not winning their vote, but they were part of a biome vote, and so it's a biome vote that happened to have a mob that was a loser that came before. This is our first mob vote loser, and yes, that is pedantic, but that's how you get, if you ever want to succeed in the technology industry, you've got to get really good at working out how to say things without really saying things. Speaking of saying things without really saying things, did you know greater than 99% of house fires happen to people who aren't subscribed to the IBX Toycat YouTube channel? Huh, that's an interesting fact. Speaking of interesting facts, there is a interesting one here from Wordfish Trombone, who says, do you get a subscriber bump when drops drop? Yesterday's member video has me wondering, and I figured I'd answer this one, just in case you're curious too. It used to be back in the day that Minecraft updates were the big day for everyone, myself included, and this has kind of changed a lot with the drop system, and it changed kind of in the year or two before that too. And so now, while there are some number of people, in this case 97 people subscribed and 50,000 people watched the video about all of the features in the Copper Age drop, far more people are excited about the new drop, and so I've gained hundreds of subscribers from people hearing about my videos on the Nautilus and the Spear and what wasn't announced at Minecraft Live, because people are way more excited for the next drop, even though the previous one hasn't come out yet, and that is the weird world of Minecraft updates, I guess. But there's the answer for you. And speaking of showing off new features, you to the foot 282 says, what sort of a username is that, by the way? Anyway, they say, I don't like how in all of your videos you say 76 new features, while technically it's true because of all the copper variants, it's misleading and just makes X actions get shattered. So I assume they mean expectations are going to be hurt when people think there's 73 features, but then loads of them are new variants. And to be clear, that's exactly why at the start of all my new feature videos, I try to have all of the features in one place. You could effectively look at this image from the video and be like, yeah, that right there shows all of the features, but it's because there is meant to be a fair comparison between updates and a fair description of what a feature actually is. If they slightly change the copper door, is that a feature? Not really. But if they technically add 8 new types of copper bars, those are 8 new features, even though they feel like less of a feature than, say, the vibrant visual range increase. It is the consistent way to measure features, and I agree it feels weird with the copper stuff, but it is pretty useful for everything else. That's why I decided to stick with it. But again, it's not like, I don't think anyone's getting their expectations shattered when you can see just how much copper is in these 73. Speaking of 73, this is your best thumbnail yet, says Business Bear 99, which as we all know is just 73 with an extra 26 added. Yeah, if you have noticed, I have been one of the thumbnail artists who used to work on the channel way back in the day, has actually decided to come back for a little bit with some extra skills and drawing, and so I've been trying out some thumbnails for them. I don't know I think they are objectively great thumbnails, but interestingly, something we've tried is sometimes the most lazy or simple thumbnail will be far more effective than one that is produced, because if you see a really high quality thumbnail like this one right here, you might assume oh yeah, it's going to be one of those types of videos, and it's actually harder to understand what the video itself is when there's really high quality art in the thumbnail. That's a really interesting bit that I guess we're having to experiment with. So if you see slightly lower quality thumbnails, it means that statistically people preferred them, which seems surprising, but given what I watch, I think that matches. I want to see a thumbnail from the video more than I want to see a piece of art about the video, but hopefully we can make decent art about thumbnails of the video and it can fill that same niche. But we'll have to see. Speaking of having to see, if your kid somehow feeds a pufferfish to a Nautilus, I think there's a bigger problem than Minecraft. I totally agree. I think that I think that so many Minecraft features are very unlikely to ever cause harm to animals, and so that's why I agree with Miko, who says realism should never be a consideration in Minecraft. If it's fun, put it in. In fact, I want to bring this up real quick because I made a video talking about the changes to the Nautilus and why it is that they made it unrealistic in air quotes. And I said pretty clearly in that video that I think really that some of the best features in Minecraft have come from them leaning into the fantasy aspect, but despite that, people are like, yeah, but actually, I think this is crazy, and they come across very aggressively towards me, or even if it doesn't seem that way, you're in a sea of people who are aggressively stating, no realism ever, and actually, I think this is a bad thing that happens in really hyper-interested communities that you should be cautious of, that sometimes inside of a community, people have very radical, crazy opinions, just to signal to the rest of the community, look, I'm with all of you, but in some cases that leads to you saying things that are absolutely wild, just to signal to other people you already agree with that you agree with them. So, for example, realism should be a consideration in Minecraft if it can lead to fun as well, or if it actively doesn't take away from the fun. I think that realism shouldn't be the consideration if it ruins some of the game, and I think that sometimes you can make a realistic game that is a more fun one. Take, for example, the cookies and parrots situation. If the parrots being fed cookies to breed is actually not just less realistic and more harmful, but also seeds are easier to obtain, and so Minecraft becomes a more fun game when you actually change that in there. So I think that realism is important, but sometimes you can make a game more fun by making it more realistic. I mean, you could argue that's what RLCraft does, but there are lots of cases where realism should be considered, but gameplay should always be king. Gameplay should be priority number one, and I think it can be really tempting as a developer, it can be really tempting in certain spheres to be like, yeah, but actually, I think that, like accessibility is more important than fun. And it's like, no, fun and accessibility are both important. You need to do both. You can't say that that other thing is more important than fun, and first principles should say that if it is a video game, the reason people are playing it is probably for fun, and so fun first, and that other thing can come a close second if you want it to, but this is my opinion when making anything, but maybe that's a crazy opinion. Speaking of crazy opinions, I wanted to showcase a post from my Reddit. It wasn't this fun one about Toycat's Toolkit and Boss Blitz being awesome. Love to see people enjoying the heavy crossbow, by the way, using it to do some explosion sort of stuff. It looks like they're actually playing super flat here, which is very fun, or maybe they've just flattened their world that much. But I wanted to share this from Zontafir, because as you all know, the IBX Toycat subreddit is a great place to share the realms you might want to have on Realm Review, even if you don't want to put them on a realm, and I really love this underwater build that was made from bricks and glass. I love these sort of old school feeling things in current Minecraft, and I just think it's absolutely delightful, and so I wanted to share it with all of you and say some appreciation to Zontafir for sharing it, and you can do the same if you go to RIBX Toycat. Speaking of RIBX Toycat, he has to go now, and I hope that you enjoyed this video, because here is our new outro for October. Ooh.